Now I'll just take you towards the components or the whole industry which can have a lot of winning investment ideas, right? So how at Niveshai when we look at green energy, when we look at this theme, we look at the whole ecosystem and we look at all the components or all the bricks that would be required to build a long-term enterprise for any entrepreneur to be in the green energy space, right? So if you look at the future that can look like is where we have solar, wind and storage as hybrid plants manufacturing solar power, wind power and storing it during the day or during the night time when the wind is blowing but the sun is not there, and using the power through the storage during periods when both sun and wind are not working well. And that in a way will go to supply our energy to our EVs, which will be then running on solar or wind power or the hybrid power that is being made. And that is where the whole ecosystem of electrification of our economies would be also green, because all these components, when they are together, they manufacture a power which is clean, and the usage of the power which through our vehicles and through our homes would be the cleanest form of energy. And that is what the dream of major countries around the world is, but it is being now accomplished by the companies themselves, which see a huge opportunity in terms of profit that they can make. So case in point, India is taking a lead in manufacturing solar power panels by companies like Waaree and Reliance and Adani in fray to make just this equipment just not for India but also to export out of India, right? China has a capacity of making 600 gigawatts of these modules. India is lagging behind, currently struggling around just 30-35 gigawatts. But a company like Waaree, which has now attained 12 gigawatt capacity itself, is now exporting almost 90% of its production to the US. And the demand in the US is so high because they want to diversify away from China, because 90% of their sourcing was from China. Even 10% of their sourcing, if they want to shift to India, that means India would have to double or triple its capacity of manufacturing these modules. Let alone the export demand, India's own demand for these modules is going to rise to almost 100 gigawatts in the coming 3 to 4 years. And that needs almost quadrupling of our manufacturing capacities in the coming 3 to 4 years, and maybe bringing the capacity up 7, 8, 10 times in the coming decade. There is a kind of opportunity which we are talking about manufacturing these modules alone, just not for India, but also for the export market, because India by 2026 is going to become the second largest manufacturer of these modules behind from China.
अगर आप ये वीडियो देख रहे हो तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आप स्टॉक मार्केट, ट्रेडिंग और इन्वेस्टिंग में इंटरेस्टेड हो। अगर आपको बहुत सारी ट्रेडिंग स्ट्रैटेजीज सच एज अल्गो ट्रेडिंग, फंडामेंटल एनालिसिस, टेक्निकल एनालिसिस के बारे में और जानना है, देन हेड ऑन टू Upsurge.club, जहाँ पे हमने हर कैटेगरीज के बारे में कोर्सेज बनाए हैं।
Then comes the wind power. Wind power again had its decade of success, now has maybe plateaued, but again because of the hybrid parks that we will need around the world, the wind equipment manufacturing and the wind installation will also become a very big industry, which in a way had hit a plateau maybe and is now picking up because the government policy driven sector is now having a lot of interest from the private sector in terms of taking the wind also offshore, where you are making higher power generation when the winds blowing on the offshore are captured by these wind turbines. And we also have companies which will be executing this hybrid projects, right? So the EPC manufacturer which will take contracts from a company like an HUL or a manufacturing company like an L&T or a Sun Pharma and tell them that your power requirements we will satisfy by making a hybrid park where there will be wind, there will be solar and there will be storage, so that you get 24 hours electricity at a cheaper cost and it is almost clean. All these pharmaceutical companies, for example, a Sun Pharma or an Alembic, have a ESG mandate also for their clients in the US, right? So for example, what is happening, if a US client is putting a large order with the Indian pharma giants, they are asking them to audit their whole energy so that they can know the impact of how they are harming or maybe not harming the environment, right? So when a Sun Pharma claims that 100% of my energy needs are being from sustainable energy, that's a big boost to the ESG credentials of Sun Pharma and hence winning more business in the US, right? And also reducing cost down home, because if Sun Pharma is buying power from the grid, it is going to shell out maybe 7 to 9 rupees depending upon what state it is. But if it goes for the clean power, it can reduce its cost to just 3 to 4 rupees. So it is reducing its costs at the same time giving it more business opportunity. That's a wonderful combination any corporate wants to have, right? But the problem is that needs execution of these projects, which will require a capex, right? They'll have to put up a large capex, and that is where corporates need to make that decisive choice in the coming 5 to 6 years, whether they want to put up that capex or not. And past 2 years, we've seen a lot of these corporates actually putting up a lot of money out there to slowly but gradually increase their investments in maybe securing their back-to-back power requirements. And these EPC contractors then to execute the projects would need a lot of other services. Case in point, any solar equipment or any wind equipment that you want to install, you require cranes, you require a lot of other equipments, which in a way are an ancillary way to play the whole theme. Because if you look at maybe manufacturing of a solar wind turbine is a very complex process, and a lot of global companies have in fact tried. They've maybe made meager returns or failed and collapsed or maybe merged with someone. Suzlon in India became a leader at one point of time, was growing very fantastically well, but one technology, you can say, problem, and now it has been a decade back in its executing and has a debt which we don't know whether there'll be, something that it can come out with, right? But when Suzlon is manufacturing these modules and some EPC contractors is wanting to fix these wind farms, they need cranes like these which can lift these modules and put up their modules put these modules where there will be generation of power that is required, right? So the crane rental service, for example, the height of these turbines is increasing day by day because people want to capture the air which is there on these heights. And surprisingly, if you look at in India, the cranes which go above 130 meters are very few, and companies like Sangvi Movers maybe has almost 80-90% of these cranes in India, and they are renting to companies, EPC contractors, to fix these wind plants, power plants. And that is where a very good opportunity as an ancillary play there is there in these cranes, or maybe the whole EPC that has been executed in terms of this plant needs to be connected through various distribution channels, or needs to be connected via the transmission lines to the grid. You need a smart grid if you want to do these investments, right? Because till now the whole world had a one-way grid where power was concentrated, manufactured at a place and was being transported to the various factories or various households, right? But when it is renewables in picture, you need a two-way communication of the grid, because there'll be concentrated manufacturing plants and there'll be distributed manufacturing plants. For example, your rooftop can also have solar. So your building is both producing solar power and consuming power, right? So it is injecting something into the grid, and it is also consuming some power from the grid. So if there is no two-way communication, that will not be enabled, right? So companies like APAR or transformer companies which are making these transformers which is enabling this grid, or which are making conductors for the infrastructure of transmission, or are into manufacturing of transformer oils or things like that, will be the companies which again are these ancillary plays to this whole theme. So another very important indicator which we believe has also signaled us that there's a large scale up move that can happen in this space is the movement in the whole solar ETFs around the world. So these ETFs had a lost decade where they did not do anything, but if you look at post-COVID, they've gone up 3 to 4x from their lows that they made in 2019. And case in point, people would look at this and say that yes, the move has been done. But if you look at NASDAQ, the ETF move in NASDAQ, or the index move that happened in NASDAQ post the dot-com bust, when it started its up move, it was just at 1500 level, and it went to all high, up to as high as 15,000, a 10x move over the past 2 decades. And it had a non-stop rally, be it a 2008 financial crisis or be the 13-14 crisis of the emerging markets or any other fall even in the COVID when it fell off the cliff, but it recovered the fastest and in fact made a new high the fastest and went up almost 30-40% in 2-3 months period. So that is where we believe the positioning of the solar ETF or the green energy ETFs around the world also is, and a lot of money would be made in these sectors going forward because the investments have been made both by the corporates and the governments in the similar nature as the ETFs have been suggesting.